Hello, kiddies. Today our story is about the Italian mob, also known as La Cosa Nostra, a secretive society that surprisingly has many parallels with the CIA and FBI. The U.S.'s premier spy agency and the federal police force. World War II saw the mafia helping the CIA, or the precursor of the CIA, and the U.S. government during Patton and Montgomery's push through Sicily and into Italy. Many times they relied on the spy network of the mafia in Italy to give them reliable information on enemy emplacements and areas of weakness that they could attack the Italian army as well as the Nazis who were also in Italy. The mafia was willing to help the U.S. military due to their disdain and hatred of Mussolini and his fascist regime who had taken over Italy. Also, on the home front of the U.S., Lucky Luciano, who was serving a 45-year sentence, opened up the docks in New York to the U.S. Army since most of the dock unions were mafia-controlled. This ensured the needed convoys were supplied and were able to get to England in a timely manner to supply the troops and individuals in England and in Europe. Also, Luciano's Italian influence had the mafia open up docks that they controlled in Italy to give the Allies places to land and places to get their convoys to unload to supply the troops. This was a big help for Patton and Montgomery's push through Sicily up through Italy, which was a major part of the war. And if they had not helped, the war could have been a lot different if the mafia hadn't helped the Allies in Italy. Due to his help, Lucky Luciano was released early, but he was deported back to Italy, not allowed back on U.S. soil. World War II didn't see the end of the mafia and U.S. government connection. John F. Kennedy's dad, a reputed bootlegger, I guess from the Prohibition days, contacted people in the mafia to help him get his son, John F. Kennedy, elected president. He said that they will work with the mob if he was elected, giving them leeway and keeping the government out of the mob's business as long as they put a stop to all the murders and the very illegal stuff such as that. John F. Kennedy even had a friendship with Sam Giancana, and they were both enjoying Judy Campbell's company. But Bobby Kennedy, John F. Kennedy's brother, became jealous that the mob helped his brother, and when he became Attorney General, he started a war with the mob. His tactics forced the mob to meet up with their dad and ask what the deal was. The dad said he would take care of it, but he became ill and was powerless to do anything. This culminated to a head when JFK was assassinated. Even the FBI's head, J. Edgar Hoover, was having issues with Bobby Kennedy. Hoover always stated the mafia was not in the U.S., though it was. The reason was Hoover loved horse racing. So mob guys would fix races, letting Hoover know which pony was going to win. Hoover was able to bet on that pony and have a sure win. He didn't do it for the money. He just loved the bet, I guess. When Sammy the Bull Gravino was arrested and interviewed, they did ask him about the JFK assassination. And he said there wouldn't be a mafia guy sitting on the grassy knoll, because in that video of JFK's assassination, you can see that his head snapped back, not forward, which means he was shot from the front. But he said anyone could have done that. When he said that, they stopped the interview and erased all manner of it. And then, later on, when the U.S. government was having problems with Fidel Castro, they asked the mafia if they could take care of it. But the mafia really couldn't get to Castro. They were having underground meetings about it, but it was just a very hard hit to attempt. Nigh impossible. Castro was a liability to the mob's ventures in Cuba, a playground for the mob until Castro took over, starting his dictatorship. Now, the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, is known for doing the dull, the dirty, and the dangerous. Many jobs coincided with mafia tactics, and in extreme circumstances, the CIA being hampered by the government regulations, would ask you-know-who to help, the mafia, who could operate outside of government regulation. It was a I scratch your back, you scratch my back type of agreement. Sometimes it takes somewhat questionable actions to counter the evil sometimes. Fight fire with fire situations. Beyond helping one another out, the CIA and even the FBI hierarchy resembled the mafia hierarchy. But the U.S. government did go after the mafia, especially when they come up with the RICO Act. The Racketeering, Influence, and Corrupt Organizations Act, or RICO Act, was a 1970s federal law aimed towards the mafia and organized crime, offering new tools for legal evidence gathering, penalties, and solutions to stop organized crime. But the government has a give me an inch and I'll take a mile way of operating, and they started using the RICO Act against normal citizens and legitimate businesses. The RICO Act devastated the mafia in the U.S. Then Reagan put back $500 million to go after the mafia, using the RICO Act to full effect, putting a major dent in the mafia hierarchy in the U.S. One reason is if a budget is set aside, there has to be substantial acts and documentation showing such acts to justify the budget that has been set aside and to keep getting said budget in the future. The feds had a quota they had to reach and to justify the budget that was set aside. This was the hammer dropped on the mafia in the U.S. by the U.S. government. Now, in my videos, when I say mafia or a gangster, there is a difference between an Italian mafioso and other gangsters. The mafia lives by a strict set of rules that a common gangster doesn't have. La Cosa Nostra were not animals. They had very strong ties to church and had national pride. Many of the mafioso having been in the military, in which they had taken pride in being in said military. And when it goes to your basic mafioso, there are many politicians who are no better or maybe even worse than your normal mafia guy. Many politicians invest in certain businesses they know are going to go up, the businesses they want to push. So they invest, having the inside line as to where to invest. And that's why many politicians who have, say, $100,000 salary are worth millions and millions. It's legal, but it shouldn't be. It's not fair to the common citizen who has to basically make an educated guess as to where to invest their money. This shows how the difference is between how the mafia acts and how the government acts. Treat the U.S. finance as a pie. The mafia only wants a piece of the pie, leaving most of the pie for the public. The government, on the other hand, wants most of the pie, leaving only a piece of the pie for the public. Another aspect of the Italian mob is their pride in their community, and they will protect it, especially from people such as pedophiles and serial killers. The mafia will go after these people, these monsters, if they in any way threat their way of life or their community. One prime example was the Son of Sam murders. The mafia was after the Son of Sam as hard as the feds, but if the mafia would have caught him, they would have dealt with him with extreme prejudice. Now, as I said earlier, the CIA and FBI have chain of commands that resemble the hierarchy of the Italian mob, La Cosa Nostra. And we'll start with the CIA's chain of command, which is as follows. They have a Director of Central Intelligence, the DCI. Then they have the Deputy Director of Central Intelligence, the DDCIA. Then they have what used to be called the Executive Director, which is now known as the Chief Operating Officer. Then you have 4 directorates, which are headed by a Deputy Director. You have the Director of Operations, Director of Intelligence, Director of Administration, and Director of Science and Technology. Under that, you have operatives, and the operatives have associates. Now, also, I will show you the mafia hierarchy, and it is as follows. You have a boss, or Don, then you have an underboss. Then you have a consigliere who advises the boss and is also a mediator and represents the family. Then you have your capo regime, who are the captains, And under the captains, you have soldiers, and the soldiers have associates. Can you see how much the CIA chain of command resembles the mafia hierarchy? Now we'll move on to the FBI. And the FBI's chain of command is as follows. They have a director, they have a deputy director, associate deputy director, executive assistant directors of different divisions. Under that, you will have supervisory special agents, and then the supervisory special agents have special agents. As you can see, the U.S.'s premier spy agency and federal police force seem to have been influenced by how the mafia's family hierarchy are set up. Furthermore, many mafia bosses are voted in by a committee, which is very similar to how, like, the CIA votes in their director by the U.S. government. This episode was to show how the mafia influence in U.S. history was an asset during World War II, and their influence was not always bad. There was some good that came from the mafia. It also shows how they differed from your normal gangster, they having national pride while having pride in their community and church. And it also shows how they had similarities with the CIA and the FBI. The mafia provided some good. They were not an absolute evil entity. They were some bad men, but these bad men also had good qualities about them. Most were not evil. Many politicians perform acts that are far worse than what your typical mafioso would do. And I would like to take this moment to thank Sammy the Bull Gravino and his ex-CIA acquaintance for their informative sit-down, which was the basis for this episode. I thank you for your watching, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that noti bell. I would much appreciate it, friends. Until next time, I'm Big Duke 6 representing Cool Kegs Studios.